The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Christ, we got tanks up there. Let's follow a range on me, Christ. I'm doing out right on the target right now. I've got a couple of these right in front of me. I'm going after it. Right, I got him.
Welcome back to the Lead Pursuit podcast. But first, before we talk about the scale of aerial wargaming miniatures, we're going to talk about the upcoming schedule and the flight plan, the flight schedule. All right. Most importantly, Adepticon coming up 26 to 30 March, our big event for the year. Is everyone excited? I'm not. I'm actually scared shitless, but I hope you guys are excited, right?
Can't wait. Got my flight suit today.
Yeah, the important things. So we can show
My
up and
party
be cool. Yeah, the party suit. Well, the good news is most of the events are filled with the exception of the BRS tournament. Now, this year, we actually have a lower turnout than I expected. We had 16 or 15 last year, and we dropped to 10 out of 20 slots this year. So, I don't know, maybe people don't like tournament play, but whatever. Hey, show up, play the tournament. We'll impress people from the night prior on the furball. We'll press gang them into playing the BRS tournament the next day. But if you want to play and don't have airplanes or are getting started too late to build your force, let us know. We'll have planes from the furball, and we can drag you in and supply you airplanes and even help you make a list. So what else do we have for Adepticon? Anything else interesting that you guys are all excited about?
No, I'm just psyched to get out the streaming rig again. Made some more improvements to it. I'm excited to get some good content generated there.
Yeah,
Maybe
it'll
get
be
some
fun.
other games on it.
That will be good, especially playing some of the other stuff that's going to be going on, like Missile Threat and a lot of the other games. Squadron Commander is going to debut up there, so we'll see how all those things look on the streaming. All right, other things in the schedule. Maybe a PAX River event somewhere in the summer. We'll see. Historicon, 16 to 20 July. Probably won't run a tournament there. We'll do more narrative events. Tournaments don't seem to be super popular at HMGS events, so we'll do something narrative. Definitely do some Vietnam jet stuff. Maybe play some more Missile Threat. Any excuse to push little airplanes around. Then NashCon will be the next month, 14 to 17 August. There will be a Blood Red Skies tournament there on Saturday, and hopefully we'll get a big turnout like we did last year and have a lot of people playing Blood Red Skies in a competitive environment, in a friendly competitive environment, and then beating the crap out of everybody else. A new event on the list this year, Phalanx Con. They're in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is just outside of Fort Campbell. So we're going to go there, support our friends with Phalanx, and they're setting up the first event this year, so that should be good. It'll be right after Fall In, so it'll be a quick turn for us. But it should be a good one to do some historical wargaming at. If you have an event, send us the info. Maybe we'll send you some swag. Maybe we'll send you some decals. Maybe we'll send you some neoprene ship targets. Who knows? We've got something we'll send people. So please send us your events. We'll publicize them, and we'll get people to at least know what's going on for Blood Red Skies. All right. Moving on to the flight line, new things people have seen. Blue Falcon decals now available in 1/300th. What? Come on, Steve. What's up with that?
Yeah, we had a lot of requests from Bag the Hun players that were looking for more options for decals, and their scale is 1/300th, so we kind of made that adjustment. Kicking around the idea of making the Patreon available in 1/300th also, potentially. So if I get a little more,
do not cater to those people that play I Bagged Your Mum. So, if they don't play the right game, they don't get decals. No, that's good. Actually, it's good to have stuff done for 1/300. We'll talk a little bit about scales tonight and why 1/300th is still not totally irrelevant, but marching that way. Other stuff. So it's been years since we produced the original Malta mat. A lot of people have been asking about it, and we just got a print run of those done by the wonderful Deep Cut Studio, and those are shipping to the U.S. as we speak. So we'll have those available hopefully at Adepticon. And if you want to pick one up there, or you can pick it up on the store and we'll ship it to you. But those are big 4x8 mats printed on neoprene, and they are gorgeous. If you haven't seen it at Adepticon, please come roll by. We'll probably be playing the furball. Yes, that event. Playing the furball on it again, and it's a great mat. All right. Rules changes, any intelligence coming up. The only thing I wanted to mention, because some of our friends have been out there play testing it and going through and kind of math hammering the tournament packet, is the tournament packet dated February 2025 is available. It is on the Lead Pursuit website. If you click on the GOE tab, it's available in the Gathering of Eagles group, and it is also on the Adepticon rules page. So if you wonder what the rules for the tournament are, then go download them, and it'll tell you everything you want to know. So it has the tournament rules. It has a tournament scenario, so please read that in detail. And then it also has some FAQs, errata, some things we're going to do different in the U.S. And, that's fine. It's how we're going to run our events. If other people want to run them differently, that is cool. We just thought we'd close some loopholes with some FAQ topics. All right. Anything else event-wise or stuff you guys have seen out there on the interwebs, on Etsy, on Cults 3D? Yes, Brett.
I've seen, although I've been disconnected for quite some time with trips to the Great White North, etc., I have seen quite a few posts with questions about different aspects of gameplay. One that comes to mind is something about multi-engine play, I think you responded to. And in another post I saw, somebody had made some modifications, I think, a little bit to the boom mechanics and found some fun with it. So I found those posts really kind of it warmed the cockles of my heart to see posts about gameplay like that.
Yeah, there was a kind of, I think it was a factor of 1.5 that a couple guys had tagged on to the boom chip mechanic to make it a little bit make the game last a little bit longer or have more shoot downs, and that was pretty cool. The other is the resurgence of the heavy fighter discussion. And I'm going to say it's interesting when the heavy fighter discussion comes from people who are also signed up for the tournament. So we'll see what shows up at the tournament. I'm going to call it this year that it's going to be the year of either heavy fighters or the year of low point value airplanes. There's a lot of people with some cheap airplane forces and lists out there.
So, it hasn't come up, though, and I haven't heard much about him. He's been kind of radio silent, but me and Eric Moreno are supposed to have like this huge pink slips grudge match this year at Adepticon.
I think you better, make sure you schedule that with him, because Eric apparently was double scheduled for the tournament and can't make the tournament.
Oh, it's funny how those stories go.
Funny how that works out.
Getting some cold feet, getting a little nervous, maybe?
Exactly. So, well, that's fine. Maybe it just means that you have to come down to NashCon and he'll come down we can do the grudge match there. Neutral site. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I was brokenhearted when he told me that he got double scheduled. I felt like I was the side chick, I wasn't important enough to be the primary. So that's all right. Go play Oak and Iron or Blood and Plunder or whatever Snuffleupagus game you're playing. I really don't care.
Fistful of Semen?
Exactly. You can keep playing Fistful of Semen over there. But yeah, that's all right. Just don't play Blood Red Skies with us. We're not hurt. Not at all. All right. Well, let's kick into the main topic. Let's talk about aerial wargaming scales. Now, this is always a slippery slope because everybody's got their pet rock, their favorite scale, their favorite game that's tied to a specific scale. But you know what? We figured we'd kick this one over and at least cover some of the major considerations. Now, I'm going to back off and let the two of you argue about most of these because, once again, there's only one scale I seem to care about anymore, and it's 1/200th because that's all I'm fucking packaging and fucking bubble wrap and sending out. So no, I shouldn't be complaining about successful sales, but holy shit, our poor printer, Chris, is printing a shit ton of airplanes and I'm packaging them, sending them out. So, which side note, thank you to everyone who's ordered Phantoms again. I think Steve's Phantom is the finest 1/200 scale Phantom because I can't keep it in stock. So apparently everybody loves it. So thank you for buying it. Anyway. All right. Scales. 1/72. Let's start at the top of the list. Big scales, because nobody plays in 135 or 148. I certainly hope not. 1/72 scale. What do you two think about it?
Those are for display models on your bookcase.
Not for serious wargaming. Steve?
Okay, so this is what I'm going to say about it. And it's funny that Brett mentioned Fistful of Seamen a second ago, right? That game was super fun. Took a huge area. Still recovering from my hernia of setting up the tables with John.
All the tables for it.
But I feel like if you have 1/72 is not for tabletop gaming. But if you had some type of big area that was more of like a role-playing style game that used airplanes, I think 1/72 would be kind of cool for that. If you had just a massive floor space type area.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of how Mustangs and Messerschmitts does it, with a giant floor area and a giant tri-part whatever stand thing that rolls around. One of these days, Steve Gussie will actually convince me to touch one of those stands.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool. The way
it does
that
look cool,
works.
but you're right. I mean, I've never really delved in to see what scale of or how many aircraft people play in that. But that's kind of like the game you play where you're playing your dude, or your dudette, whoever's going to go shoot stuff.
I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, so it is kind of cool. The funny part is looking at that contraption that they used to put the airplanes on. Super detailed, and I guess it works. It's like naval games in your living room. If you got the room to do it, why not? I guess.
But I guess to me, the reason Fistful of Seamen works is because it's not really about the game. It's about the look and the socialization and more the experience of doing it, right? So Mustangs and Messerschmitts still seems like it's very much about the game, right? But
it seems it's super about the flight parameters of the airplane, which is always what we kind of say is the thing that at least most of us don't like about aerial war games when they get super granular. I'm in a 5-degree climb, 30 degrees left wing down. But I will also say, much like all of the ships out there on the tables for Fistful of Seamen, that gives you the immersion. Fistful of Seamen, that whole layout would not have been cool if it were 3 4x6 tables and everybody standing around those pushing small little mini ships. It wouldn't have been near as cool as it was pushing these giant, big, pirate ships around.
Yeah, and running around, talking to people. Like a game like that with big airplanes, I think would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it would end up being something like a kind of an Area 88 kind of thing where you'd have your one airplane and everybody's kind of for themselves. And I think that would be interesting. But, I like Brett says, my problem is 1/72 models for me are just a little bit too big. And for doing what I want to do in aerial wargaming, it's me playing with a display model. Now we can always talk about Big Red Skies. I won't. Everyone knows my opinion.
What's the game we like that has the dashboard and everything? It's a pretty tight game with lots of players.
Aerodrome.
Okay. Could Aerodrome be played with 1/72, you think?
I'm trying to remember what scale we played with at historic.
It is.
I thought it was 1/72.
The World War One is definitely 1/72, but I think the jets are 1/144th.
I'm trying to remember because I swear the Hurricanes that we played with were 1/72, but you may be right. They may have been 1/144th.
I thought they were small. Yeah, 1/144. I think they were smaller than that, than 1/72.
But World War One was definitely 1/72.
Yeah.
They use 1/72, I think, a lot as placeholders for some of the aerial bombardment or whatever it's called now in bolt action. It looks scale appropriate. It looks good on a table.
Yeah,
not really I think it just because it looks cool. I don't think it's really necessary for the gameplay because it's not an actual model that I think that it really interacts with.
Interact so much. Yeah, exactly.
But it looks cool. I saw a game report or whatever of some guys playing and they brought in something like a.
I think, gameplay, or I should say immersion wise, narrative wise, I think it's super cool for bolt action because it fits the scale and it's better than bringing in 1/144th or something smaller. but yeah, it's at some point you're putting an airplane on the table for something that's just going to be a die roll for a template. But that's all right. Whatever. It's you want immersion in the game, and if you put an airplane there, it makes it good.
Dude, I think we could actually do this. Spin off a fistful of semen, yanking the joystick.
No, we've said the word semen already way too much in this podcast. No, there will not be a spin-off of that called whatever. Yes. Anyway, moving on.
Is that a Marvel infringement? Because of Spider-Man?
That's so wrong. All right. 1/144th. What do you guys think about it? Yawn. Boring. Do you like it for World War I? For Wings of Glory?
Wings of Glory. Because I think it fits kind of that size that we're all looking for, where it looks the right size. You get a decent amount of detail on it, but it's not too big. World War I, 1/144th is.
Oh yeah, I said
good.
too small, but I'm dyslexic. I meant too big. Too big for all the things I play. I guess I don't play any World War I, but I could see that now. Those aircraft are smaller
they're
anyway.
Pretty small. It was kind of funny though when we played Wings of Glory, and you bring the big reconnaissance bomber, whatever thing out there. Those are still pretty big at 1/144th. But whatever. You're going to have outliers in the scale. I'll say that from playing Wings of Glory. Yeah, I don't mind that scale at all. I think it is size appropriate. And, if you 3D print a ton of them like Steve has for the entire Western Air Armada, then you can, then they do paint up nice.
It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, though. It's all about how it looks, right? And
yeah,
that scale for World War I at least gives you enough space to do some of the cool color schemes and things. You can make them look really good, which is one of the reasons why we fight so much for 1/200 and some of the bigger aircraft.
Well, yeah, and that was, not to come to the closing point of the whole show, but I think one size isn't going to fit all for what we're going to talk about, because I agree. 1/144th looks great for World War I, and it's kind of the sweet spot for me about plane size to board size to token and chit size, all that stuff. And I guess I wouldn't mind playing even World War I a little bit larger, but by the time you get to 1/72nd, everything that's in relation to the airplane's the huge thing, and everything else kind of is dwarfed by it. So yeah, I say for World War I, I'll give 1/144th a thumbs up, and I have way too much modern and World War II in 1/144th for Flames of War and Team Yankee that I've never built. Oops. So still sitting in my closet of shame. Let's talk about Doug's favorite scale, 1/200th, and why it's the best scale ever and should never, ever be doubted.
We only permit the other scales. It's 1/200.
They're only there to make us look better.
I think, like you said, right, it's good size for the amount of detail you can get on the plane. I don't think the smaller planes, I think the smaller planes look really good, and I think the bigger aircraft are just small enough that it's still playable, right? I don't think any of the bigger aircraft like super overwhelm the table, right? So I think it really is that like perfect spot.
Yeah, here's the one problem I have with 1/200th, and it's kind of it goes back to my previous point about the size of all your accoutrements. Like you get a 1/200 scale jet, and now all of a sudden the size of that against the base, against the dice that you're putting on the stand, if you're playing check your six, all those kind of things. Sometimes the later jets do kind of dwarf everything else on the table. But I've said it like 10,000 times. They just paint up so nice. And looking at the A7s over here that Matt painted, the F4s, all those, yeah, I mean, they just look beautiful at that scale. So little tiny World War I airplane, a big Vietnam airplane. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the biggest jet? Probably like the Phantom or like the Tomcat if somebody had them. Those would probably be
the
like
Vigilante.
Vietnam.
I mean that your
that's kind of
111, right?
Yeah, 111.
Oh, 111 is pretty big. Yeah. But I think there's also a reality, right? If like somebody wants a Vigilante, right? That's not like, or like I've had people say like, do an SR-71, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be massive. That's also not going to be
It's like flying terrain.
Yeah, it's
You're not gonna have 6 of them.
Exactly. And it's not something that you're going to be doing like micro movements with, right? It's something that's kind of like traversing the board at like it's not an integral part of the mechanic of the game, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I'll even say the F-105 is pretty freaking huge. And you put a 4-ship of F-105s out there, they kind of dominate the table. But you know, what I think is pretty cool is you take a look at that and then you look at these itty bitty little MiG-17s chasing them down. It does give you a good feel of the scale. But could you do that in a smaller scale? Yeah, you could. Because I think when you get to Vietnam and things like the Thud, the Phantom, even the F-8 Crusader, those really kind of push the envelope of what's playable. But a lot of that's also because Blood Red Skies has a stand that bends forward and aft. I mean, if you're just flying them around level on a stand, who cares?
When we played Missile Threat, I wanted everything to be 1/200, except, in that game you have like AWACS and stuff, and those will probably have to be a smaller scale, right?
That was the only thing I didn't want in 1/200. But yeah, I really enjoyed Missile Threat, but I really wanted the models to be bigger. But yeah, whatever. I mean, you can play Missile Threat at whatever scale you want.
Well, then you're getting into some more modern aircraft. Like, how big is an F-22? I mean, that thing is so big, man.
Yeah, that thing's freaking honking huge. Exactly. All right, so let's talk about 1/300th, my least favorite scale, and the people who play it that are all losers if they're named Evan. Anyway, so 1/300th scale. No Iron Dice Gaming people were hurt in the making of this episode. What do you guys think about 1/300th?
So I need help understand. I guess Bag the Hun, right? That's 1/300. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, is there any reason why they wouldn't adopt 1/200, or is it just kind of how they got started? Because
it doesn't fit in the hex. So it's a 1.5-inch hex game, and a 1/300th World War II plane pretty much always fits in that hex.
And 1/300th is one of the standard sizes that CNC and Skytrax made for years. 1/285th for GHQ. So
sounds
it's
like we need
kind of what
bigger
people
hexes.
are used to. Yeah, exactly. Just make bigger hexes. Which I will give a shout out to Rick, our buddy that plays AI. He's like, "Why do you guys keep playing AI on 2-inch hexes? I made it up to 4-inch hexes, and it's great. You can put your big Marauder bombers in there. Nothing overlaps the edge." But yeah, so there's a limitation in some of the games, and some of them, it isn't the scale of the model itself, it's how much crap you throw on the table. Like Missile Threat. Like Missile Threat can get a lot of crap on the table when you've got multiple waves of aircraft, AWACS bombers, SAM sites, and getting a couple inches back on the airplanes kind of makes a little bit of sense there. I hate to say it.
I was just thinking, if you play lots of games, maybe folks don't play that 1/200. Maybe it's cheaper to get a mat with bigger hexes than it is to get a whole new fleet of airplanes built and painted.
Exactly. It's probably true.
I think 1/300th is actually kind of growing on me a little bit. Not for World War
Sell
II.
out.
Like I can't ever see adopting it for World War II, but I think for modern jets, it's kind of the sweet spot, because you can do the cool detail on the paint jobs. Yeah, I think for jets, I'm kind of starting to steer towards the one.
I don't know. I think you lose. There's a significant difference in the level of detail between 1/300 and 1/200, and I say that after Matt's jets that he's done for me, and the fact that you can really see the ejection seat and intake danger icons and stuff like that. You can see the tail and nose art. I don't know. I'm always, I know I'm going to always be a 1/200 scale fanboy, but the 1/300th, I will absolutely agree, probably plays better physically on a lot of tables.
So this is what I'll say, going back to like your accoutrement for the whole game, right?
Yeah.
When you play Missile Threat and you start to get little missiles on the table and all that kind of stuff, I feel like when you step back and look at the board, the 1/300 scale with the little missiles and kind of like the overall scene that the game gives you, like, looks really cool at that scale. Where with the bigger airplanes, it kind of just looks a little off when you start throwing like traveling missiles in there and stuff like that. I think just looking at the whole thing like a display, I prefer the 1/300th.
I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to think about that.
Would you call AI 1/300?
Yeah. Well, it's somewhere kind of in between. It's 8 mm, so that means it's slightly larger than 1/285th, which is 6 mm. So it's probably almost 1/200th, I would say. Of course, they're all sci-fi, so who knows how big they really are.
Man, this is a little bit of a, I don't know, sidetrack, I guess. But when we played Missile Threat, I remember being all geeked out about having some 3D terrain that was in like step foam. I can't remember the brand. I should have looked at it before we got on tonight. But it almost looked like railroad terrain. It's gaming terrain, but there's this particular vendor I have in mind. It's all this foam stuff that's covered in it's pre-flocked or whatever. But it has natural shapes, but it's always the altitude of it, for lack of a better term, is always like a ½ inch or an inch or something, and you get these different shapes, and so it's modular in that, like, you could build a mountain range, I guess, on your table, and the bases could still fit on it, so you could be at a certain flight level, and you could potentially have terrain that you can't maybe fly over if you have a ceiling of certain altitude or something. You could fly over it, but it would limit the amount of distance that you could descend, I guess, is probably more likely in the gameplay. But anyway, thought that was kind of cool, and it seemed scale appropriate for like 1/300. Probably more so for 1/300 than it would be for even 1/200, because of the size of the bases, if I recall, a little smaller.
Yeah, especially if you have the patented Blue Falcon Hobbies.
Yes,
patent pending.
Application pending.
Yeah, exactly. I think 1/300 has a lot going for it. I just will never admit it publicly to anyone ever. Not at all. All right. 1/600th scale. Shaking your head, Steve.
Is that the Pico armor size? Is that?
Yeah,
what size?
that's
my little tanks and stuff. That's cool for that, for ground targets, because you could put them on those little pill bases, and you could paint up the bases even. Is it what scale were it's a different scale for the little buildings and stuff, but I think
those are usually either 2 or 3 mil.
The little tanks and trucks and stuff, you could clearly tell what they were, and they still paint up nice on some pill bases. It's an appropriate size for a Blood Red Skies game to occupy the space on the table for a target token. So I have a bunch of those painted up. Actually, I have a bunch of little like anti-aircraft guns and some other things I should paint up. But at this point in that scale, I have a bunch of trucks and a bunch of tanks for those targets.
I'm just laughing looking at these itty bitty airplanes.
So every missile threat
1/600.
game, every missile threat game I think that I've played, except for even though our one at Historicon was 1/600, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were teeny tiny.
It's just too tiny, and I get why people do it, because it's a long range engagement. It's want it to seem like it's far away and all that, but it's just doesn't give me. I mean, I think all of us are kind of like into wargaming for like the cool factor of the way it looks, right?
Yeah, for the visual appeal.
Do it.
Yeah. My problem is, at the end of the day, miniature aerial wargaming, while we do beyond visual range stuff, that just doesn't look cool. I mean, unless you have like a Phantom with 6 Phoenix missiles coming off of it, but it just doesn't generally look cool. But when you're in a dogfight, it looks cool. And the problem is when you get in a dogfight with 1/600th, they're little colored blobs, little camouflage blobs.
Yeah, and it looks weird, right? Because every flight stand you're going to use has to be big enough to balance on the table, right?
Right.
So like you figure even the smallest flight stand is probably like an inch or an inch and a half square or hex or something like that, right? So when you have a plane that's like really, really tiny, especially when people make those flight stands that are like the antenna
extendable.
Off a 75
you love the antenna,
right?
Yep.
Like you put a 600 scale plane on that little antenna, and it's just like it looks so weird. It just It's just weird.
We can go on from weird to what you called stupider. You didn't even spell it right in the show notes. Nice work, stupider. You're obviously a shop teacher, not an English teacher.
Correct.
So the only reason I put 1/1800th in here, and you're going to laugh, was when I bought the two new anti-aircraft sights, and we'll talk about those later on next week. That same guy produces 1/1800th airplanes that I thought 1/300th airplanes were going to be squadrons bad enough. And then 1/600th definitely was going to be done as squadrons. When you go to 1/1800th, yeah, you're not fielding individual airplanes. You're fielding a small 1-inch base with like 6 airplanes on it. But what blew me away was the level of detail people put on those. I'm like, it's a tiny little resin dot with wings. But people still put a lot of effort into painting
Would
those.
that be kind of like Star Wars Armada, kind of where you have like a stand with like maybe like multiple? Was that Armada that had that?
Exactly. Yeah, Armada did that for the fighters. You'd have multiple ones, and a couple games do it, like not Cruel Seas,
Victory at Sea.
Victory at Sea or War at Sea or whatever. What are they called? Yeah, Victory at Sea. Does that where it's got multiple airplanes on the little Y-shaped stand. It's got like 4 or 5 airplanes on there.
I was just about to ask if that game is about 1/1800 scale. I think it might be. It's bigger than 1/2400.
Yeah, it's either 1/18 or 1/24 because 1/24 is the normal micro knot scale. Just like our neoprene ship targets, the best neoprene ship targets in the world. But yeah, oh my God, airplanes at that scale, tiny.
I think 1/1800 is about the biggest you could really get away with for like a ship target or something.
Yeah.
I still think it's a little too big, but I've seen people do it and understand why. I think it looks cool and all. I think it's a little big. But that might be about 1/1800.
Don't be a hater. You need the 1/200 scale Bismarck to attack. With
1/1800 might be the size of the little bridges and buildings we have, though.
Yes, because those are quick math in public. 2 millimeter. Yeah, so they're 1/1800. So, yes. All right. Other scale questions, comments. I think
1/2400, best ship scale. Period.
Best ship scale. Period.
I would agree.
Ever.
I have a question about airplane scales. How do you feel about mixing scales in the same game?
Zero problem.
Okay.
I don't take I guess, but also remember, you always give me shit about this. I'm the guy that was a hex and counter guy first. So if there's a reason to mix scales, I'm fine with it. If I'm just doing like a World War II dogfight, no reason. But I mean, like if we were going to play Missile Threat with 1/200th, I would say, sure, do the AWACS in 1/600, whatever. It better be sitting on the other side of the board anyway.
Yeah, so that's just
flying higher.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of my question.
It's all
right?
perspective.
What if you do like a 1/600 AWACS or a 1/600 B-52 with 1/200 jet fighters? That's kind of cool, right? Is that fine? Or is like, I don't know if I would look at that and be like, nope, don't like it. I need a 1/200 scale B-52 on the board.
I think it would actually be the other way around. You would really enjoy having those bombers, but it's like when we put the B-29s out there at 1/200 scale. It's great for a dogfight, but if I don't need to put a MiG-17 next to or MiG-15 next to a B-29, why do I need them to be the same scale? But, I guess you get in that question of what are the bombers there for? Are they interactive with the fighters, or are they on their own thing to go find and kill targets? So that they don't have to be the same scale as the fighters.
I'm thinking back on that Missile Threat game we played, and I think you've won me over with the 1/300, but I could see doing 1/600 on the AWACS. Yeah, because it was sort of just a place marker in some ways.
Well, and even when we did all the Korea scenarios 2 years ago at Adepticon and put the B-29s out there, I mean, those were 1/200th. We could have put 1/300th ones out there and saved ourselves a little bit of room, and it would have made sense. I think 1/600 would have looked a little funny, but whatever. They're bombers. They weren't supposed to be interactive.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to like view those bigger planes almost as terrain rather than an aircraft, right? That's an interesting way to kind of like describe that to people. Like, oh no, this is like more like the
I use the example. Yeah, it's like games that have a big pirate ship in the middle that doesn't move, that everything else moves around the pirate ship. It's sometimes big aircraft are more like terrain. And I think there was it Aeronautica? Somewhere there was a mission that was done that way, where you just left the bomber in the center of the table and you moved everybody, that many inches, one way or the other, based on what the bomber's movement was. So you could do that. All right. Well, that was kind of fast and furious.
I'm going to shift this conversation from game to hobby for like painting and stuff. So I've had this idea for a couple of years and I haven't pulled the trigger on it, and I'm not likely to. So I'm going to share this to the broader audience in the hopes that maybe it inspires or get somebody enthusiastic about doing it. You're the Lead Pursuit Podcast Good Idea Fairy. You can't be like the interwebs Good Idea Fairy. Well, I got an idea I'm going to share with the broader audience. So I've always thought it'd be kind of cool to make a force perspective diorama with 1 to 200 and maybe 1/72, or maybe even smaller. Like, so the image that comes in my mind is the artwork for a book. It's like can't remember it's a little one of those historical paperbacks, and it's all about Malta, and it's the attack on the not the Indomitable. I can't remember the British aircraft carrier that was in Valletta Harbor, and all the Stukas are diving on it. So it's sort of like first person perspective from one of the Stukas, but you see all these other Stukas diving in front of it. So they're at different distances to the target. So some of them appear small. Yeah. Something like that. So depending, you have to look at it from you have to paint feet on the floor and stand here to look at the diorama to get the perspective. I don't know. It's kind of
there was one I just saw that was a Dauntless at Midway, and so I think it was a 2400 scale carrier, and then 1/72 scale for the Dauntless, and that looks pretty cool because once again, force perspective, you're looking at it from the tail on end of the Dauntless as it's diving. So yeah, that would be cool with multiple other aircraft at different altitudes.
Yeah, I guess maybe almost build it into like a shadow box kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So you're only
you're kind of forced to look at it from a certain angle.
If you build like a shadow box and you did like a huge B-17 formation, and like the first one was 148th and then 1/72, and then like all the way out into the distance with B-17s, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, you might even be able to throw some some BF-109s flying into the fighter stream or the bomber stream. That's a big project, but it would be super cool.
Exactly. Good luck.
Might even have some 1/600 BF-109Ks in the back,
like all the way down there.
No one's going to notice. It's a dot. It's a dot at the far end. All right. Well, anything else in closing that you want to say before I leave everyone with the most important thing to remember?
How do we announce that there's still neoprene ship targets available? I think that was kind of
that was actually the most important announcement, was get them now before they go away, because they're not going away, because we still have a bunch of them. Neoprene ship targets for you and all your friends. All right. Well, if you've got all your neoprene ship targets and you're ready to make it to Adepticon, then please keep climbing for advantage. Because that's a horrible, horrible way to end the show. Nothing better.
You still like it.
You still like it?
I still like it.
God, terrible. Because if you're a loser that plays with little plastic airplanes, keep climbing for advantage.
You gotta sell it.
Because if you have no life and you're over 50 and you smell like the basement, keep climbing for advantage.
You gotta really commit to it, Doug.